can see here that sort of out of solidarity, McDonald's Brazil decided to separate the famous arches, golden arches, and they put this campaign online. Bernie Sanders, who you may know was a former presidential candidate up until recently in the U.S., called them out and said, McDonald's said basically, stop spending money on publicity stunts and pay your workers sick leave. So a total flop for McDonald's. They quickly removed the campaign and are trying to sponge off the reputation after this. If you look at this, it gives absolutely no positive message. It's all about McDonald's. It doesn't add any value to anyone. So not much of a positive campaign. There were a few other brands that did this sort of physical social distancing. Coca-Cola was one, another flop actually. Fortunately, they didn't put it on social media, but they did a social distancing logo where each letter was separated, and then they said something like better apart, stronger together, better apart, something like that. Very oddly, it was only on a digital screen in Times Square in New York in the middle of the pandemic when no one was leaving home. So I don't know what they were thinking of spending tens of thousands of dollars putting out a campaign that no one could probably actually see except for the few people in the press that took pictures and then slammed it. So yeah, not smart. And then this next one is Circle's Life is a telecommunications company, and just trying to make a cheap buck, a total publicity stunt. They've refashioned, I think it's Dettol, it's a disinfectant, and they've changed it into data, and then they say we might not be able to protect you against 99.9% of germs, but we're keeping you safe with telco contracts and et cetera, et cetera. So really just trying to make a quick buck, get something out of this this pandemic. So to sum it up, what I would say is obviously communicate during a crisis is the most important thing you can do. To do it well, provide free resources like IKEA did. It can be recipes, it can be how-tos, it can be tutorials, explainers, all these kinds of things. And they work quite well on digital media, particularly video. Be inspirational, like Nike. Just feel anything that makes you feel good and that you want to share with people. Helpful advice and tips, and make people laugh. I mean, I'm sure all of you have gotten from the aunt that you haven't spoken to in months will send you a funny video about COVID-19 in the past 2 months. We've all been overloaded with GIFs and memes and fun videos, but they go viral. And they make you laugh. And then the ones that have worked the best and the way it should be done is to make it about your community and not about you. So no, McDonald's, we don't care about you changing your logo. We care about what you're doing for your employees, what you're doing for your customers, what you're doing for the better good. So yes, so the don'ts are obviously don't communicate without adding any value. Don't make it about you. And don't try to make a cheap buck or take advantage of the situation. And then another thing that you may have come across this as well at the beginning of the crisis is don't use materials that don't relate to the current environment. And here, maybe towards third week of March, you might have seen some ad campaigns. You're like, why are they talking to me about this? And we're in the middle of a pandemic. So just be aware. And this is where you need to keep your finger on the pulse of the web ecosphere and and what the influencers in your industry or in your sphere of activity are doing and saying. You just really need to stay current. Your message should stay current. Now, communicating beyond COVID-19. Well, first of all, we don't know when beyond is, right? We have heard that there should be vaccines maybe in the second semester of this year, but how fast that'll happen and to what degree that will end this pandemic, considering that there are 8.7 billion people on the planet. So it's very difficult to gauge that. And so I think we will see different phases, and we will have to adapt our communication to those different phases. However, as I said earlier, I think that fundamentally our consumer behaviors will change. And We Are Social and Hootsuite actually did a survey of this as well. And they spoke to, in certain countries, they spoke to internet users aged 16 to 64 who expect to continue new behaviors even after the COVID outbreak ends. So, obviously, a lot of people will probably keep that Netflix or that YouTube premium subscription. 20% say they would spend more time on streaming. 15% said they would spend more time on social media. Basically, across the board, people are spending more time on social media. Again, I mentioned gaming. I think 10% they may be the newcomers to gaming, that they'll stay on and they'll do more. Great area for growth. You may have heard of Twitch, which is a streaming service entirely dedicated to gaming. So if the demographic of gaming interests you or is part of your target market, then I would certainly look into that. And another potential area maybe that I just want to signal is listening to more podcasts. Audio is very cheap to produce. Audio advertising is very cheap. And so that's also an interesting, perhaps, area to look at. But yeah, consumer habits will change. They're not going to change as much, I think, as some of us would like to think. However, we've already heard, there's been industry reports saying that companies worldwide will let people work more from home. There's a huge amount of savings to be made, not only on real estate, but also on traveling expenses and overhead, all these different things. So companies are going to encourage more people work from home, even if it's partially during the week. But you can imagine if after 2 or 3 months of extensive increased social media activity, if you have just gotten back a few hours of your time a week when you used to commute, well, maybe you will be spending more time on social media and gaming and streaming. Maybe you'll have that time. And also what we need to bear in mind is that the more people work from home, the more fluid our schedules are going to be. And that's what we saw on social media. People started looking at social media on Monday mornings, which was totally new. So social media marketers today are completely changing how and when they post information, because our habits have changed quite a lot. And again, as I mentioned, We Are Social and Hootsuite have a plethora of reports and just a wealth of information on these kinds of things, and are really good to look for. Especially marketers would need to use these tools, again, to keep your finger on the pulse of the market. So what I would say in conclusion is beyond COVID-19, don't stop communicating. You absolutely need to still communicate. You have to create that bond with your community, and you have to keep that bond. You have to nourish it, and don't take for granted that they're there once and they won't go away, because people are fickle, and brands need to be aware of that. You need to constantly adapt to the times. So as I said, be on the lookout. Maybe look at what the influencers in your industry are doing, what they're saying online, market research, and try and take the temperature of your field of activity as much as possible. Keep the focus on the user, so the person you're addressing, rather than on yourself or your brand or your organization. Always make it about them. And then something that we need to look out for is the diversification of platforms. And I think that as we saw in the graphs before, I didn't mention it, but the messaging services like WhatsApp and Messenger have exploded. However, it's what we call dark social. Marketers don't have access because for the moment on WhatsApp, you can't do advertising. So they found some tricky ways to integrate WhatsApp into their marketing campaigns, but it's still quite difficult. However, that could open up. I think that Facebook is looking at perhaps adding advertising to Messenger. So that might open up. There may be new platforms that we haven't heard of. TikTok just a couple of years ago was completely disregarded by most of the Western world, and now it's one of the biggest. Baidu and WeChat are some of the biggest social media platforms in the world, and most of us in Europe anyway, and mostly in the West, we don't know much about it. So I would definitely look out and try and anticipate where the new platforms are going to come, so that you can be sure and get your message across to those platforms. So I think I've spoken enough for now. I hope that you were all able to understand this, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. You're welcome. I'm glad it was interesting.
Well, maybe one question?
Yes?
First, that's Christian.
Hi, Christian.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really well done. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We could see by age categories what people were interested at, and what they did on the social media. You also touched the issue of timing. When in the day or in the week people are using those media. My question is, maybe it's very detailed, but do we have an idea, with or without COVID, generally speaking, whether rather younger people versus older people are using social media at different days or time slots during the day?
Yes, so we do have that information, and again, Hootsuite, We Are Social, Sprout Social. These are organizations that track this for us. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which generation looks at Instagram at what time. But you can easily look at one of these resources and find out by demographic, by country, by age, and all that, when it's best to post what on what platform, how often you should post on a platform. So, for example, it's probably okay to post a little bit more frequently on Instagram than it is on LinkedIn. There's a higher tolerance or acceptance rather on Instagram than on LinkedIn for posts. So, but it's a whole science,
Yeah.
and it's a profession. So, but yes, that's all available and fairly easy to find out.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Let's see. Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, then I guess it's up to me to thank you for your time and your patience with my monologue. I know it's easier usually when in person to have a discussion, and I would be interested in hearing from some of the students in the lot to see if they agree with what I said or if they had something to add, particularly with these the Gen Z statistics here. So yes. Oh, Sarah has a question. Okay, let's see. One question. Do you have an idea on how COVID-19 is affecting and will impact creative industries? Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean exactly by creative industries. I mean, I know that in terms of the performing arts, it's been quite difficult, obviously, because we can't physically get to performances. I think that if I can speculate, I would say that if anything, well, actually, I know this, that we've had quite a lot of content thrown at us on social media. And I was saying earlier, even your grandmother's sending you memes and GIFs and funny videos and stuff. And after with COVID-19 fatigue, we all want to have a triage and look at stuff that's really interesting and really well produced. I think that, and so I think that in the creative industries in particular, the better the content is made in terms of not just the quality of the content, but also the quality of the craftsmanship is going to be more and more important and will help you stand out from this swamp of GIFs and memes that go around. So yeah, I think that in the creative industries, if you're working on graphic design or motion graphics, I think that there's a lot of opportunity right now. If you're into video, there's a huge amount of opportunity. Video in general is usually the most engaging type of content. It's the one that goes the most viral. Laura can attest. We talked about this a week or so ago. Video is 60,000 times faster to absorb in terms of information than reading. So people would much rather see a 2-minute video about what you do or what products you have than to have to read 1,000 words on your website, for example. So I don't know, Sarah, if that answered your question, but I do think in general, consumers are going to want to have even higher quality in content that they consume in terms of the content itself and the craftsmanship of the content. Nikos, I'm not sure what you meant by no continuing education during quarantine. Oh, I think you mean for the internet activities. That's a good point. So I think, Nikos, what you meant is on this slide, it doesn't have any education, and maybe they did not poll for that. But that's a good point. Although there is watching webinars. Any other questions from anyone?
Paige, I think Chan has a question. He was asking about fake news on social media.
Oh, I missed that. What do you think of the rise of? Oh boy, don't get me started. I just did two classes on fake news. I mean, there are two reasons why we're seeing a whole lot of fake news right now. One is, again, trying to make a cheap buck. As I say, it's people that are trying to generate revenue through content that will go viral, and so will therefore get them more page views and therefore get them more revenue through something like Google AdSense or advertising around the content that they are producing. So that's one reason. The other is obviously political, and for whatever reason, we're seeing quite a lot of fake news around the virus, the coronavirus, and to the extent that the WHO has called it an infodemic as well as a pandemic. I would say to that the recommendation is to look at least 3 sources to confirm information, and reliable resources like the WHO or legacy media companies like the New York Times, the Guardian, the BBC, Swiss Broadcasting Corporation. These types of information, I would definitely check sources, especially if it sounds too good to be true. And then I would absolutely not share it until you've confirmed it. Even at the beginning of this, and I don't know if this goes for some of my colleagues, but even at the beginning of this pandemic, I had educated friends my age that were sending me things that were clearly not true. But the problem is, once it's out there, you cannot once it's out there, it's out there, and you cannot manage how it's read and interpreted. So I know there was a politician, I think in the U.S. that actually tweeted something that was fake, put a question mark behind it, as in he was questioning whether it was true or not. But when you read this without context, it could be true. So people take it out of context, and then therefore, without wanting to, he actually spread fake news himself. So Chan, was that helpful? And maybe another thing I can add is that Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram have been under a lot of pressure to moderate their moderate the news on the pandemic, and they've each taken certain measures to seed out the fake news. But it's extremely difficult, and of course it's very expensive, and we still have to pay attention. But I know that the major social media platforms are spending time and resources trying to do this. Good. Okay. Any other questions? Did I miss any? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, all, and I wish you all a good evening, a very safe evening, and yes, be a responsible consumer of social media. Thank you.